Hi, welcome to Innovating Leadership, Co-Creating Our Future. Today we're talking about better leadership to promote the positives in peace and culture. I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf. I'm the founder and CEO of the Innovative Leadership Institute. Our guest is Dr. Mike Hardy, who is the founding director of the Center for Trust, Peace and Social Relations at Coventry University in the UK.
It's great to be here, Maureen, and good to see you as well in this virtual world we live. I'm a peace scholar. I'm interested in leadership, and how do these two fit? It's very simple to see the absence of peace in a world of conflict, a world of turmoil, a world of violence. And it's very often easy to see also bad leadership. And so I'm really interested in the convergence of thinking on this around, can we find a way to articulate positive peace, where peace is the default that we see normally, and where better leadership is a responsibility that we step up to.
Your entire life revolves around bringing that vision into reality.
So I started as an economist, Maureen, and something happened on the journey that said to me that simple economics, even though most everything is about economics, it didn't have the answers to some of these questions. By accident, certainly not by design, I ended up on a journey in which I was trying to focus on how we, as people, in the relationships we have, could construct a way of relating one to another which would lead to a better circumstance for everyone. I didn't see simple economics pointing in those directions at all.
We share the background in economics. That was my undergraduate degree, and I loved that simple graphs made sense of the world. And then I started working with people, and it kind of blew the theory that the economic charts could explain what was happening.
In their classical economics, as you know, what we do is we suspend disbelief. We hold everything constant and we change one or two things in order to see what relationships exist. But you know, the world is a complex, adaptive set of systems. We know we've got these complex processes now where you solve one problem and you create others, and it's far too complicated to draw on the Austrian algebra that led to the simplicity of neoclassical positive economics.
That's a perfect lead-in to, especially in the U.S., as we are in the process of selecting our next president, help us make sense of what you're seeing and what are these global trends?
I see a major breakdown in some of the systems that we expect to work. In the mid to late 2007, 2008, the finance system collapsed. The finance system, which is there to manage our debt, to create wonderful opportunities for us all, failed to deliver, failed to protect us, needed a massive bailout, an artificial insertion of support from taxpayers. We can go on. The system of governance that we so value, particularly in the more developed North and the democratic countries of the world, which we fought for many hundreds of years, are simply not working in the way that we expect them to work. What's happening is the democratically elected leaders appear to be using their constituents to give them short-term power, even though the long-term nature of the problems they're trying to address require much longer terms than they're given. So we bounce along, your president bounces along from one 4-year term to the next, our government's the same. As a result, the focus on winning power back from the people at the next opportunity, the next vote, becomes far more important than resolving some of the issues that we elect them to look at. We can go on. This is, in other words, as I see it, a systems failure. And when it's systems failure, there are many ways we can get our toolkit out, try and tweak it and try and change it. Well, I think we have some major realignments about the way in which we work and the way in which we expect our leaders to lead and the way in which we expect those who govern us to be accountable for the actions that they take.
The idea of a systems failure, that usually we get from the system what it was designed to deliver. I wonder if our systems, as the world is now more interconnected, more complicated, are our structures designed to navigate the level of complexity that we currently face, or do we need to update the governance? Just like I refresh the operating system in my computer, is there a refresh that would give us a democracy more representative of the people it's serving?
It is difficult and there's no easy solutions. But I do think we have to reframe the expectations we have of our current systems if they're failing. So let me take a very simple thought. When I look back at my history, and I'm old enough to have experienced some of this, not just read it, I look at the post-Second World War period as a period when the Western world particularly started to rebuild, started to look at the traumas and that conflict in 1945 and rebuild. The way to do it, it set up a new world order. It set up the United Nations, it set up international jurisprudence and courts, it set up a view based on a philosophy that, hang on, we can't do this in little island states. We have to do this together as a global community. So we set up global institutions, and they largely did create a more positive outlook to things like poverty and the fight of poverty, the themes of equalization across the global north and the global south. And over the 70 or 80 years since then, the world has made significant progress. But this is seeming to run a little thin now. So the international organizations set up at that time no longer appear to have the credentials, the respect, the central power that they perhaps needed. What's happened is that the nation states have reasserted themselves and said, oh, well, many things have come along and have challenged the security of island states in such a way as that they've decided we need to fragment, we need to protect, we need to build walls around ourselves because it's all so complicated out there. Let's just make it simple for us. My own thesis is that the leaders have failed us because they've failed to think broadly and outside the scope of their immediate responsibilities. So we have a Europe that's fragmented with Brexit and others. So we have in the United States. How long is it before California decides that it doesn't want to go with the trust of the United States and it's just big enough, it's strong enough, and liberal enough place to go it alone? I have no idea. But I think the fragmentation that's happened is a consequence of people's frustration with the inability of our current system of governments to deliver some of the needs that we have.
Let's go to the work of your center. Can you share with us what you and it are doing?
It's no secret to me, but perhaps to others, that we set a center up that tried to address some of the confusing and complex system failures that I've referred without dwelling on analyzing failure. It's very interesting. We finished the last segment talking about this contrast between national leadership and global leadership. And I think we've got other levels as well. If you think about the contemporary world, we do see there being some help the more local we become. When we look after the locality as well as the world, it seems to work best of all. So we set the center up years ago, and it was very innovative in its setup. It's a focus on peace and peaceful relations, but it was one of the first centers that was clear in articulation that we weren't interested in physical and financial or even human capital. We weren't interested in the traditional building blocks of security. We are interested in social capital. It's a center which lives its name, the center for trust, peace and social relations, which puts trust and relationships between individuals at the center of its work. And this enables you to bypass the problems of national governments, national rivalries, and focus on some of the real needs. And what I see and what I saw at the time is that the thing most missing, the glue of social cohesion, the extent to which we trust each other. And in a competitive world where there's resource shortages and where there are differentials and inequalities, trust is the last thing you seem to invest in. So we've done a lot of work at the center in looking at simple relationships and how important trust might be in provoking a world which is more secure for people, irrespective of the nature of the difficulties we face. One of the biggest instabilities in the world are communities of multiple ethnicities, of multiple race, of multiple age, very diverse cities, which can house hundreds of different languages and ethnicities. And we expect people just to get on with it and not to have problems of identity and problems of anxieties. But we know that you need to work at multicultural communities, and the Centre's doing a lot of research on that. It's looking at three major issues at the moment, which have proved to, I think, real contribution to understanding the policy, both at national and at global level. The first is about the nature of human insecurity and the importance of these relationships, people-to-people relationships. The second is the recognition that the world of people is on the move, that we have mass migration of people around the world, 70 million people on the move, and that creates huge problems. The places which are left behind and the places where people arrive, for those on the move and those receiving those who arrive. And finally, the issue of crowded places. We're seeing that a lot of conflict and a lot of the absence of human flourishing takes place where people are crowded together. More crowded places need more assessment, more analysis. So if you're interested in conflict management, if you're interested in intractable differences and how to coexist with these, we think you should work more on intercultural relationships, on people-to-people relationships, and the building of trust. Set alongside that, how many leaders currently focus on building trust? How many leaders currently focus on empowering local areas to develop social capital, networks and relationships that are more likely to support? How many leaders generally are welcoming of the movement of people rather than provoking fear of the movement of people? That there are simple things that better leadership could spend time focusing on. These things are not going to go away. The movement of people, the crowded places that have grown up, the paucity of space in some of our rich and safe lands, and the general lack of security that people have with changing labour markets, and now this cursed pandemic. And that's what we're doing. We're doing it, I think, really well. So we're being successful in terms of winning grants, getting people to commission work from us. And you know, the Centre's grown from about a dozen people in 2014 when we started to more than 160 now. These are some of the brightest and most creative academics that you wish to work with. It's an absolute privilege to be associated with them. I have to tell you now. It's a secret of course.
What new is coming out? What else are you seeing, especially in the space of global leadership, that is helping build trust?
Social capital isn't always good. We normally say, look, this is a disconnected world, but actually it's connected. We travel, we have internet, we have Zoom, these conversations, we have telephones and telecommunications like never before. But actually social capital can be both benevolent and positive, and it can be quite malevolent and quite difficult. It's actually the tribes that many academics talk about, the tribalism, that sometimes is the source of violence and the source of conflict and the source of human insecurity. The work we're doing is trying to focus, how do we develop positive social capital? The networks and the relationships at the local level that are mutually reinforcing, that are reciprocal, that are based on what's right and developed in the right way in that sense, as opposed to the social capital that is not, that actually is elitist and is grouping and quite exclusive. So that's quite important work, and it doesn't come naturally, and that's why we've labelled this talk that we're having about positive peace and positive culture. What sort of culture have we got in our world that would create such insecurity to people? That's what we need to understand. So let me give you an anecdote, a depressing story from the United Kingdom this week. I read that my government, I elected, although I didn't vote for this party, I'm part of the democratic process, is actually considering the development of wave machines, the sort of machine that we use in swimming pools for pleasure that create turbulence in the water and fun. They're thinking they're creating wave machines that they can put in the English Channel to confront rubber dinghies full of migrants. What sort of culture is it that would create that hostility by putting technology to create waves in a calm water where you have desperate people in rubber dinghies? So I want to understand better why our culture is by default a more positive thing, why it is that's sometimes quite malevolent. And all the movement around Black Lives Matter, around Me Too, around child abuse, domestic violence, which has grown horrendously, and the prejudices that have been fueled and sparked by challenges of COVID-19. This is describing the impact of our culture, the way in which we are, our value systems. And we need to understand them better so that we can see what we can do to improve.
I will generalize and say most people are at their heart kind and good, and if a stranger came up to them in a way that was safe and not threatening, they would certainly help them. They would call if someone's car broke down on the side of the street. And yet we seem to live in a world that has promoted this fear that immigrants endanger our jobs, versus immigrants do much of the work that needs to be done in our communities. We've just promoted a level of fear and dis-ease with people who are different, whether it be Black Lives Matter or women or whatever it is. We have taken good people, and as we aggregate, it seems like the goodness that we would individually demonstrate is not collectively demonstrated.
Yeah, I'm not saying that these things are easy, but I am saying that through our research, we can show what we need to understand better. You need to get to grips with why is it that it's easier to see bad leaders than to point out good leaders, because it's easier to see conflict and to feel conflict than it is to feel peace. The notion of positive culture and positive peace that leads to this demand for better leadership, for me, it's quite a logical step. It requires us to refresh our focus on whatever it is. So, do we just focus on wealth creation and assume if there's more of everything that everyone will benefit? No. We have to have systems, we have to have recognition and understanding, which is much more complex than that, and I think often much more long-term. The short-termism of current politics has led to the polar extreme, the polarizations, the populism of current governments, who find that they can win power in the short term. They stay in power by having many short terms that are just added together. That's not a recipe for progress. And we need to show that with evidence that there are better ways.
Back to the question of, is there a culture 2.0, a governance 2.0, that when I think about positive psychology and the positive impact it made by introducing these ideas that by creating a positive culture around opportunity and not being delusional, increased immigration causes challenges. It's a complex situation, and when done poorly, the country can end up being worse off. So isn't our challenge to introduce models and frameworks and approaches that allow us to navigate the current challenges and create a positive, peaceful culture? And now it's the opportunity to step back and examine, are we swimming in polluted water?
So there was a wonderful question I read recently, someone who said, we're trying desperately to get back to normal. We often hear that, the normalization. Oh, why can't we have Christmas like we've always had it? And say, one of the ways through is to take responsibility now, to say that when all this is over, when we get through this, because we will, technology will help, we're a clever, resourceful being. What sort of world do we want when it's all over? Do we really want to have the one we left behind when something came along and took it away from us? I don't want the prejudice. I don't want the inequality. I don't want the lack of opportunity. I don't want my children not to be better off than I and my parents and all these things. I want us to find a responsibility somewhere that says, let's take stock of what destination we want to create. Let's not assume it's going to happen for us. We can take control. And that requires much more collaboration in the world, much more compassion in the world. And those, for me, would be necessary ingredients of better leadership. Leadership that's compassionate and leadership that's collaborative. And it's unforgiving in both.
We have a competency model that was published in the ILA book, Leadership 2050, and we talk about humility as one of the competencies, and caring more about doing what is right versus being right. And it seems that those competencies help us create this world? How do we create the space to step back and say, what about my individual experience? Last year, you talked about how you processed anger. I'm focusing on how I navigate anxiety. How do I imagine my life being different? And how do I contribute to the world more effectively?
So we're looking now at the moment, and ILA have been tremendous in sponsoring work on standard and on criteria for good leadership development and what a good leader looks like. But here's the thing. I think we've spent a lot of time in leadership looking at doing the right thing. The power of purpose, we focus on general goods and public goods, doing the right thing. But actually we've got to add to that, doing the right thing, but doing it in the right way. And that's the future. That's where we have to look at. It's not enough to do the right thing. We have to do it in a way that is sustainable for the planet, for our relationships, for equalities, for global south. We have to do the right thing in the right way.
What do you mean by that?
It's really based on our work on social capital, on this notion of relationships. So I think we can set an agenda for what needs to be done. We know the things that needs to be done. We need to create jobs for people. We need to build houses for people to live in. We need to have right schools. We need properly qualified teachers. We need nurses in hospital. We can list them very easily. Isn't it also the case that we need to get those in a certain way that's not destructive, that's not in a finite sum game? In our imperial past, when we needed wood, we went to another country and took it. When we needed labor, we went to another continent and shipped it out. This is doing the right thing in the completely wrong way. The social capital theory, without going into social capital 2.0 or whatever, there are a set of things that are really important. The first, participation. So are we doing it in a way, all the stakeholders, whether they're the beneficiaries or those that lose out, actively participating in the process? Quite often we're not. Do we ask parents how to train teachers? No. We're experts. We know how to do that. We do it in loco parentis. So there's lots of examples. Secondly, networks. Do we actively encourage our young people to socialize in productive networks as opposed to hedonistic networks? Do they just play with their gamers, or do you find a balanced and more eclectic set of networks? Thirdly, trust. Do we value trust at all? Do we regulate and police everything so we don't need to trust anyone? It used to be the case, that your word was your bond, that you could say someone and shake their hand and say, this is it. Now it's not. There's litigation, there's regulations, protection. So we protect ourselves away from natural trust. Belonging. Why do we exclude people? Then there's reciprocity. So there are a set of things that can inform the way we do things. And they're really about doing things together as opposed to individually.
How do I put something like this into practice?
It's saying that the way we conduct ourselves is as important as what we do. I'll keep saying that over and over. Are there bonds between us that we can exploit? That don't exclude other people, but then grow a rich relationship within us. So how many employer relations are of the type that will fit a fully participative, fully engaged community? Some corporations are better than others in the private sector. Some governments are better than others. One of those that really involve all people as members, as stakeholders, rather than as units of labour. Then there are bridges. There are many people that are very different, but how much do we invest in creating bridges between different colleagues in different associations? How often, it's the case that when you look straight ahead, you see what's in front of you. When you look to one side, you see the world. And I think we're very weak as leaders, usually at looking at peripheral vision, looking over your shoulder, looking at how many people are keeping up with you. We tend to be driving forward in a very singular parallel track. And finally, linkages. Do we have a collaborative world, or do we have one in which we're quite exclusive? Do we have a world which says that together he can be stronger than separate? I don't think we do. I think that the whole nature of competition between societies has become more important than the end goal and the end destination. So this will require an enormous investment in just stopping doing the right thing and focusing more on the way you go about doing it. It's going to slow us down, and it's worth it, Martin. Better leadership is about saying that it's just as important. The nature of the footprint you leave on the sand is as important as the journey as you progress across the sand.
So what I heard was 3 main things. Creating bonds where people are fully participative. Second is the bridges, my ability to create a more robust and novel solution to our problems because I encourage different voices and different points of view. And third, the linkages, moving away from me beating you is more important than how we interconnect and create a more peaceful world. And yet sometimes I'm just so busy getting the stuff done. And I know that what happens to someone down the street is important, but I'm just struggling to get through my day.
With bonding, don't ever take your closest friends for granted. Don't ever take your family for granted. You have to work at the relationship. So bonding is about the way you relate very close at home. Don't take people for granted. And with bridging, don't stay in your bonded little existence. Reach out every now and then to see the consequence of what you're doing on someone else. What happens when very cheap labor in another country makes the sneakers that you so love? Think about the bridge from you to there. Don't have to cross it. You have to really recognize it exists. And the linkages, just realize that we're all joined up in this as a very small world and that we're not doing very well at looking after it. So these linkages between people or groups further or up or further down the hierarchy is really important. Think about those less fortunate from yourself. The simple messages, they're really difficult to do. But if our leaders led and showed how this is done at corporate levels, in universities, government, a snail light towards a better place.
I agree that our leaders need to do it. And absent good leadership, we can be the leaders. That each one of our listeners has the opportunity to make the world better in their sphere, irrespective of the competence or negligence we're seeing on the global stage. So how do people find out about the ILA, find out about your Peace Center, and find out about you?
The ILA is an amazing organization. It seeks to combine the scholars we have globally with the policymakers we have globally with practitioners. Have a look online. The articulation of our work is summed up in our annual global conference. It's an enormously rich resource because it combines people who care about the simple thing that we're complex people, a demographic that needs people to emerge and help us by providing leadership and providing the right leadership, doing the right things in the right ways. We don't solve anything. We simply seek to ask more and more of what I think are the right questions, and we explore things. It's my center, the Center of Trust, Peace and Social Relations. You can find us online at Coventry University. The IRA at the moment has mobilized a set of global thought leaders to try and map out the requirements for better leadership.
Mike, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate all the work you're doing.
So it's been a good conversation. I go on a lot, I know, about some things that matter so much. But the ILA has become a great home, and I'm privileged to be the board chair. Such a talented group of people.
And such important work.
Thanks.